Ladies and gentlemen, we're looking at the topic theory of consumer behavior in economics. We are zooming our lens on utility maximization and consumer equilibrium. That's what we're going to deal with in this topic. For a brief background, theory of consumer behavior as a concept is just the idea we're trying to push forward in helping us to understand how a consumer behaves. It has been established in economics that consumers are rational beings. And rationality implies that you want to pay less to get the highest level of satisfaction in the consumption of any commodity. So at the heart of every consumer is to maximize utility. Put it differently, the goal of every consumer is to maximize utility. So we want to see what is the link or the connection between utility maximization and consumer equilibrium. The connection between utility maximization and consumer equilibrium. Utility maximization is the goal. So the goal of every consumer is to maximize utility, while consumer equilibrium is the result or state of achieving that goal. In other words, for a consumer to maximize his or her utility, he or she must get to the point of achieving equilibrium in the consumption of any goods or services. So utility maximization is the goal, while consumer equilibrium is the result or state of achieving that goal. In other words, consumer equilibrium indicates that the consumer has maximized their utility, given their constraint. The consumer is at equilibrium. Now, the consumer has maximized their utility given their constraint. Remember, the consumer has a constraint, which is income and the prices of the goods and services. So, in spite of those challenges, in spite of those constraints, which is our income and the prices of goods, the consumer is still able to maximize our utility. Then we can say the consumer is at equilibrium or has attained equilibrium. So the consumer is at equilibrium when marginal utility of commodity X is equal to price of commodity S for a single commodity. In other words, if the additional utility, that is, the additional satisfaction the consumer derives in the consumption of a particular commodity equals the price of that commodity, then we say the consumer is at equilibrium for a single commodity. Marginal utility of commodity X, that's the additional utility he or she derives in consuming that commodity, equals the price of that commodity, then we say the consumer is at equilibrium for a single commodity. Now, for several commodities, the consumer is at equilibrium when marginal utility of commodity X, all over price of commodity X, equals marginal utility of commodity Y, all over price of commodity Y, equals marginal utility of infinity. Say you buy several commodities, all over price of infinity, then that is the consumer is at equilibrium for several commodities. Explaining better, marginal utility of commodity X, that is the extra or the additional utility the consumer derives in consuming an extra unit. The additional utility the consumer derives in consuming an extra unit of a particular commodity all over the price of that commodity equals the additional utility he or she derives in consuming an extra unit of another commodity all over the price of that commodity equals the additional utility he or she derives in consuming an extra unit of all the goods or services he or she purchases against all over the price of those commodities. Then we say the consumer is at equilibrium. Finally, or in summary, consumer equilibrium is the point where utility maximization has been achieved. To put it together, utility maximization and consumer equilibrium are like Siemens twins. You cannot really separate them. They have a bond. For you to maximize utility, you must achieve you must be able to attain equilibrium in the consumption of any commodity. Thank you. There's a question. Are we there?
Okay, shut it.
Let me see. Play.